Aggro Mage is still one of the best decks in the meta. I'm uncorrupt, and I'm going to show you what my updated list for the current meta actually is. And how I landed on this list is that I realized that certain cards that were being played in the most popular list are actually just bad. Cards like Suspicious Alchemist and Crooked Cook. And so ultimately, I decided to replace those cards with 2 copies of Incorporeal Corporal. This is really just 5 damage to our opponent's face. We play it on the board. At 5 health, it's hard for them to remove. And pretty much, we're going to be able to get to attack our opponent in the face 1 time for 5 damage. Just keep in mind with this card in particular, in the Priest matchup, if the Priest uses some type of silence to silence our other Death Rattle minions, they silence this card. And then, we've got a 5/5 that's able to attack them repeatedly. And also I've added into the list 2 Brittle Skin Zombies. Now listen, people are going to laugh at this card, they think it's a bad card, but I feel like it fits perfectly into Aggro Mage, and specifically this version of the deck. When we play this out for only 2 mana, our opponent really doesn't want to get hit in the face for 4 damage. And so if they remove this card, they're still going to be taking 3 damage from the Death Rattle. It just ends up being guaranteed face damage, which is exactly what we want from an aggro deck. Now, one thing to keep in mind here, it has to die on our opponent's turn in order to be able to get that Death Rattle 3 damage. If we kill it by trading into a minion, we don't get that Death Rattle damage, so make sure you keep that in mind as you're playing this card along with this deck. Now, the reason why I love this version of the deck so much is because we actually punish our opponent for playing correctly. And the way that we punish our opponent by playing correctly is with Death Rattles. So the general game plan for the way that we want this deck to work is we want to be able to play minions in the early turns, and we want to be able to hit our opponent in the face. We get that chip damage early. And then later in the game, we finish our opponent with burn damage. The burn is going to be coming from Arcane Bolts, either from Arcane Worm or from Arc Splitter. And then, of course, we're also going to have Frozen Touch in the deck as well for, again, just spell burn to be able to kill our opponent. And when I say that we punish our opponent for correct play, from our opponent's point of view, they want to remove our minions because they don't want to take that face damage. So in order to fight against our game plan, our opponent's going to be working hard to clear our side of the board. But as they are correctly trying to remove our side of the board, they're actually advancing our game plan. Now what I mean by that is, you know, they're removing minions on the board. They remove, for example, an Arc Splitter. Now they've actually placed 2 burn cards in our hand to be able to kill them later. If they remove the Brittle Skin Zombie, they've now taken 3 damage to their face. If they remove Skeletons from Cold Case or the Nightcloak Sanctum, again, they could be taking that 2 damage face, or the 2 damage could actually hit a minion on the board, and if it removes minions on the board, then our opponent has less resources to be able to remove the minions that are on our side of the board. And so it ends up working just really, really well by punishing our opponents, again, for the correct plays that they want to be making. And even Awen, if they're able to remove the bigger body 5/5 that has +2 spell damage, by removing this card because they can't afford to leave it on the board, they may actually give us the +2 spell damage on a much cheaper minion, making it easier for us to be able to play +2 spell damage plus the burn spells that we've mentioned before. And again, don't forget about Frozen Touch here. As our opponent is killing minions, even if they don't have any Death Rattles on them, our opponent is potentially infusing the Frozen Touch. That's why I love this deck so much. We have our game plan, and our opponent actually helps us advance our own game plan. That's enough of me talking about the deck. Let's head out on the ladder and see how it does. Aggro Mage. I love this deck. So our opponent is a Death Knight. At least we think they're a Death Knight. It could be a rogue. We never really want to keep Frozen Touches. We also don't keep Thalnos. I am going to keep the Nightcloak Sanctum. I would keep this card in every matchup except Demon Hunter. Against Demon Hunter, it's worthless because the Demon Hunter isn't playing minions. But against any deck that's going to play minions, the Freeze and the 2/2 Skeleton is going to be good. So we're actually going to keep the Nightcloak Sanctum here. Other keeps that we would potentially consider are Iron Deep Trog, Shivering Sorceress. We would keep the Snow Flurry. This is also a keep, by the way. That's what I was trying to think of. Don't worry, I'll get there. I'm a little bit old, but I'm not past my prime. So we could potentially just go coin and get out early. Our opponent did nothing on turn 1. If it is a rogue, we want to hit the board early. And really, we want to hit the board early against any deck. The coin, I think this game is going to be most valuable in hitting the board here. So we could go Worm on turn 1, which is a little bit weak, into this on turn 2. Actually, I think I like that play better. So a little bit of waffling there on my part. I didn't necessarily want to get out the 5/5 because it's going to attack once and die. And could have potentially coined out the 2/3 here. But ultimately, this is the line that we're going for. We're just going to go as wide as possible. Would like to see the Frostweave Dungeoneer pull a Frozen Touch. And it does. Now we have our burn in hand, and again, our opponent's going to be wanting to remove these minions. As they do, it's going to be infusing the Frozen Touch, which is going to give us more burn and more damage to be able to throw into our opponent's face. So, pretty happy with the way this game has started. If our opponent plays a minion here, then we're just going to freeze it. That prevents them from removing our board, as well as adding to our side of the board. And if they just remove minions, then we're going to potentially look at maybe just playing like a brittle skin zombie. So, we see the Chillfall and Baron come down, and I'm going to keep to my plan here. I'm going to play the location and freeze this. This prevents them from being able to take a trade, and it also means that our opponent is not going to be able to kill this minion off and draw an additional card. I'm not totally sure what we're facing. I have seen some 30 health Blood Death Knight decks. It could just be Frost Death Knight. If it's Frost Death Knight, we are definitely way ahead here, unless they can discover some type of area damage, which would be along the lines of like a Remorseless Winter. We see the 4/4 coming down again. This play is a little bit weak, a little bit slow on turn 4. And so we have some interesting options here. I think I actually want to take a trade, again, to prevent our opponent from killing this off and drawing a card, and to free up the board space. So I'm going to freeze that minion, make board space, and then I'm going to play this Amplified Snow Flurry, and I'm going to ping the 4/4, again, just freezing my opponent's minions so that they can't kill our minions, and then I'm going to get down the big 5/5 here. And all of this damage is just going face. We want to prioritize killing our opponent. We're not going to take unnecessary trades on our opponent's side of the board. So the one trade that I made there was to free up space for a bigger minion on the board, as well as freeze our opponent. If it's Blood Death Knight, that's exactly the card that we didn't want to see. They actually just healed all the way back to full, which is unfortunate. But we do have the infused Frozen Touch here now, so our opponent back to full. I feel like we want to use this infused Frozen Touch. We're going to shoot it face just so it can get infused again for additional damage. And I still want to shut down our opponent's card draw, so I'm going to take that freeze. And then we're going to go ahead and shoot our opponent in the face. I'm going to play the Brittle Skin Zombie. This guy goes face. This guy can hit face. I'm going to go ahead and take a trade on the 4/1 simply because our minion was still affected by the Blood Boil. If I hit him for 2, they heal for 2, so there's no change to our opponent's actual number of health. Keeping in mind now we have 2 Deathborns, so being able to clear the board of the smaller minions and getting these 2/2s in play is pretty strong. We're going to have to see how our opponent responds here. And if this dies, we're hoping the damage actually goes on the 2/1, I think. And a Death Strike, so they heal 6, but they take 3. So we're okay with that. And they heal for another 2. Deathborn's just a little bit weak on this board, simply because it's only going to remove 2 minions. That's not great. We're likely going to want to use our infused Frozen Touch again. So I'm going to start off the turn with a Prismatic Elemental. See what we can discover. And I think just minions on the board is going to be good enough here. Could actually take the Gone Fishing to try to dredge the bottom of our deck. Having these minions on the board, though, potentially allows us to have a Deathborn turn for an additional minion. So next turn we would have Thorngrowth Sentry Deathborn in addition to the other minions that are on the board. So I'm going to go ahead and use this Frozen Touch, and then I am going to get down an additional 5/5, and again we're just punching face here. So unfortunately our opponent has had a lot of healing, being a Blood Death Knight. That's something that we're going to have to deal with in this particular game. But so far, the game plan is going exactly along the lines that we would hope for outside of that. Our 5/5 dies here. And unfortunately, our opponent is actually just hitting like every healing card that's in their deck. It's going to make it challenging for us. But we're just going to keep with the plan here. Thorngrowth Sentries into Deathborn. And this is going to give us 4 of these 2/2s. Our opponent's still going to heal for another 5 from the Corrupted Ashbringer. But we have 2 Frozen Touches in hand that can be infused. Likely at this point, we're hoping to just draw an Awen. We would really like to be able to start sending that damage into our opponent's face with spell power on these. Arcane Bolt is now active. We want to save that. We're going to draw a Frost spell here, hopefully. We hit a Flurry, and we're going to double Frozen Touch to the face. And I think it's actually worth it to just flurry this 5-3. It's going to protect a minion on the board, likely the 2-3, so that they can't make that trade. And we know that Blood Death Knight is not going to be playing a lot of minions on the board, so we're not necessarily holding it hoping to freeze 2 or possibly 3 minions as the game gets into the later turns here. So things still going pretty good. Our opponent's at 17, and we have 9 damage from hand. A1 again is likely our best draw. On turn 10, that would turn this into 15 damage if we could play A1 and these 3 spells. And if A1 dies and we hit something smaller, then potentially we could do a lot more damage than that. Again, our opponent just doing what Blood Death Knight does, which is exactly nothing. They're actually just gaining lots of health. And continuing to draw cards here. We see another Chill Fallen Baron come down. I'm going to ping into this guy. Actually hit here, face, and then Deathborn again. Which I think seems certainly not great, but maybe good enough in this situation. So again, we're just keeping our board as big as possible. We now have infused frozen touches again, and I'm actually going to hang on to the Arcane Bolt. It feels like we're really going to need spell damage to be able to kill our opponent this game. They're still sitting at a really healthy 36, and but you can see, even though our opponent has been able to heal so much, you think about the amount of damage that we've done to them. They healed for 10 from the weapon, 6 from the Death Strike, that's 16, plus the 2 Vampiric Touches, that is 36. So our opponent would actually be dead if it wasn't for all the healing that was in the deck. So you can kind of get an idea of just how strong this deck is. Even if we don't win this game, potentially, you get the idea. And it's kind of coming to a point now where our opponent just has so much healing that we're not going to be able to win. At this point, I can continue playing, but it's just unrealistic with my opponent at 40 health and with the Gnome Muncher on the board that we're going to be able to win. So I'm going to throw in the towel and concede here. We actually just lost to a Blood Death Knight just because of the amount of healing they were able to generate this game. But again, from here, you can see just how much damage this deck does pack. It's always a bummer to lose, but it does happen sometimes. Our opponent's showing Death Knight again. It could be a rogue. Just as I said last time, we're not going to keep any of these. We would rather have better cards. I don't mind losing games, though. I mean, that's just part of what happens in Hearthstone. And I always feel like it's important to show, you know, what actually happens in these games. Just so if you go out on the ladder, you don't have an unrealistic expectation. Blood Death Knight probably is really good against this particular Aggro Mage. But how many Blood Death Knights do you really see on the ladder? If you're seeing a lot in your own pocket meta, then you might want to avoid this deck. I don't see Blood Death Knights at all. That was my first one of the season. I just want to get out the Trog here, punish our opponent if they play any spells. I feel like this is likely a rogue. And I'm 100% wrong on that. Another bummer. I just want to get down this guy, and I'm going to go ahead and freeze our opponent's face. That way they can't trade and hero power to remove the 2-3 here. So we know this game that we're up against Frost Death Knight, they have a similar game plan to what we have. So we really want to be able to dominate the board and make sure that we kill them before they kill us. And we're going to go ahead and get down the Sorceress. And I'm going to get out our big boy 5-5. The question is, do we want to take this trade? It gives them an easy kill on the 2-3. They could swing into this to remove this minion. They could hero power to remove this. And then this would be our last minion on the board, which dies as soon as it attacks. But I don't think I want to take that trade. I'm actually going to go face here. You know, this is a value trade, but I really don't think it's worth it in this case. I would rather have that 2 damage. And I want to save the flurry. Our opponent's going to be playing a lot of minions on the board, so potentially we're going to be freezing 2 minions if we can wait until at least turn 5 to play it. Our hand is really interesting this game, in that we just don't have cards that do anything. We're not really ready to start throwing damage into our opponent's face, although we will once this is infused, if our entire board gets removed. And we're really still in the phase of the game where we're looking for minions, so we're really looking for a good playable top deck here. Frostweave Dungeoneer would be good, and Cold Case would be good as well. Nightcloak Sanctum wouldn't be a bad top deck either, assuming our opponent puts a minion on the board. They may be inclined to just hero power. And it looks like they're going to try to clear the board with some damage off of the Death Chiller here. So I would actually prefer to take this damage to the face. And unfortunately, we take it to the face and the 2/1 dies. This card is going to die anyway. We're just hoping to be able to deal damage with it. Unfortunately, it gets frozen, so we're not going to be dealing that damage. And we're actually in a pretty tough spot here, but that's a nice top deck, so we're going to be able to play both of these. We'll remove that Death Chiller, and our opponent may have to spend additional resources to remove our 5/1 simply because they don't want to take that 5 damage. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to Frozen Touch here. I can't afford to take damage. We know our opponent still has the coin, which would set off the Death Chiller, and we have 3 1-health minions. We still need as much minion damage as we can possibly muster to be able to win this game. So unfortunately, having to use the Frozen Touch there before it was infused. So a bit unfortunate, but again, the correct play. We're just trying to make correct plays here and not worry so much about unlucky and you know, all this other kind of thing. You can always point to unlucky, but at the end of the day, in Hearthstone, you're going to win games, you're going to lose games. The only thing that really matters is, did you play correctly? Did you make the right plays? If you make the right plays over a long period of time, you're going to win more games than you would if you had just made, you know, other plays that weren't necessarily right. I think I am just going to go ahead and use the Flurry here to lock this down, make sure that our opponent doesn't hit us with it and that they don't get a trade. And then we're going to go ahead and play the Arcane Worm. And again, we're all about face damage here. So we have our opponent's face frozen. They're at 14. We do have 1 burn spell in hand. And potentially we have a good Deathborn on the following turn. We'll have to see how many of these minions they can remove. But even taking a trade here and Deathborn is going to be really good. Just depends on what our opponent does. They're at 14 health, so we're kind of getting close to the range we would want to be able to burn them down. This is good for us because that's something that's going to die to the Deathborn. So potentially we're just going to make a really wide board of the 2/2s off of this, at which point the game is likely just over. And we see a second Chill Fallen Baron, so we're going to trade here, we're going to Deathborn, and that's actually just going to end the game. And second Deathborn here as well. We're going to make sure that we attack face, and then we get down the Deathborn. This draws 2 cards for our opponent, plus their top deck. But we get a nice board of 2/2s here. We're also going to have 2 damage from Arcane Bolt plus a ping. So pretty much it feels like they're going to have to kill us here or they're just going to lose the game. This actually does nothing. And Viserion does nothing. So this is going to be a win here. We're going to finish off our opponent. Oh, he's still going. Still going. Icy Touch. And again, it doesn't matter what it hits. If we don't actually have lethal. So our opponent finding a way to hang on. Interesting. So let's see. We have... we only have 3 more damage, so we're just going to Deathborn again here. And our opponent's still in the same spot where they're going to have to kill us. Oh! I miscounted. We actually have lethal. Unfortunate for me, making myself look like a fool on YouTube, but I'm sure you're probably used to that if you're familiar with the channel. That's going to do it for the video. Aggro Mage, get out and play it. I really, really love this deck. It's fun, and I think it's strong. I'm Uncorrupt. Thank you for watching.